Welcome to another great episode of the Beyond Normal podcast. I am your host, Kenny Groom. We have a very special guest today. The company that they are building is called Vision. It is in the real estate realm. They're doing some amazing things. But the reason why I wanted to have them on as a guest today, many times when it comes to real estate and that topic of discussion. People just think you have to to be in that business. You just have to either build the homes or you have to own the property. And there's so many different business types. And as you all know, I am on a big B2B kick at this point in our Beyond Normal journey. And so I definitely appreciate our guest, Nate Robert-Eze, for coming on and just giving us a little bit of a background into what he's building in this incredible company called Vision. So without further ado, Nate, how's it going?
Man, it's going well. Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate you coming on for an episode and just wanting to share your story with our guests, our listeners. Many of our listeners have already started along the path of being a founder, but others haven't. And so hearing perspectives from people like yourself who have already taken that leap of faith and are gambling on themselves definitely allows them to be a little bit more informed on their entrepreneur journey. So without further ado, tell our listeners a little bit about what you were doing prior to even taking that gamble on yourself with Vision.
I found entrepreneurship by way of architecture. I'd always been a pretty creative kid. I always tell people I grew up sort of drawing in church. I would get in trouble for drawing on the offering envelopes in church. And I just loved getting ideas out. Always loved getting ideas out. And so I found architecture to be, with the drawing skills and all those things, the creativeness and just the visionary thoughts. I found architecture to be the best outlet for that to enter a career. And so when I went to college, I realized that was very short lived. So I ended up pivoting to urban planning, which I did because I still wanted to stay in the built environment realm, architecture esque, because you learn about architecture, when you're studying urban planning. But I wanted to sort of expand the reach and learn more about the built environment in general, whether it be policy, real estate, um, landscape architecture, or architecture, which is kind of like what makes up what we see as urban planning. And so got into that and graduated with that degree. And then I got a master's in urban design. And that's where this real estate thing really started to appeal to me. I started really, really finding an appreciation for real estate because I realized where the power actually sort of like where the power is held, like by real estate developers who actually think of the buildings. They hire an architect and then the architect actually designs it. And that's how it comes to life. And so that's what I was more intrigued by. I was like, okay, who is the person behind, who is the thought, who is the mind behind this? Who's the creative behind this? And so I started digging deeper. Funny enough, I ended up going back to architecture, working for a few architecture firms, but there was always this draw, right? There was always this draw to the creative. There was always this draw to technology. And so I worked for two architecture firms who both took me under their wing. And I think because one of them was pretty established, but they had pretty archaic ways of doing business, like especially when it comes to business development and proposal building and marketing. And so I was able to bring some of the young flair that I had coming out of school and help them to scale. And so I would see directly how that was beneficial for that company. And so once I left that company and went to the next one, that one was a startup. So I was able to take some of the skills that I learned at the other job and bring them and translate them directly to my new role. And that's when things really took off. And so I guess the entrepreneurship spirit sort of started brewing again, around that time, because I saw how direct inputs and ideas sort of turned into business results. And in 2020, I started, my company, and I started my company under Render Vision, and that then was rebranded into Vision, and here we are.
I love it. I appreciate you taking us on that journey with you. It's really interesting to hear that you had that calling towards architecture at a young age. I'm I'm only imagining how much what the repercussions were for drawing in church.
Yeah,
They probably weren't very good repercussions at all. They're probably very severe.
yeah,
But you getting at that outright in terms of your creative outlet and that leading you down the path where you actually went away from architecture for a little bit, but now here you are still itching. What is it? Itching, scratching that itch, right? And that's really cool to hear. Like that's a full circle story. You sitting there telling us that. I'm curious when I think of architects. I think of like this really cool like balance of like you got to know some of the technical you got to have a technical skill set in terms of the math and some of the STEM skills, but then there's also this creative element. Everybody I've known who's in this space is a really interesting thinker, if I can say it that way. So I'm curious for you, like has it been about does it feel like that sort of balance, I guess, being in this space now where you get to leverage both sides of the creative side and then the much more technical kind of STEM focus, because there aren't many career paths now where you find a balance like that.
yeah. Dude, that's a really good question. So one thing that I realized in architecture school was that the I guess the technicality that I was drawn to was in technology. And that's why I pivoted because we didn't have that. It was more so sort of the creative side and then the technical side from a math, standpoint. And I don't know, something just would tell me back then that things are going to change very fast when I get out of school. Just seeing where technology was going, because I would always love technology. But again, there was really no way for me to scratch that itch back then because, we were almost, until our third year, we were banned to using software. And so like literally we were not allowed to use software to create our designs. And, for I think the intention was good, right? Because they wanted people to really be creative and get ideas out of their mind without using technology, which, it taught me a lot. But now it's like that's how we that's like how we ever get any idea out is really by interacting with this with some type of machine. And so I would say technology and entrepreneurship has given me another outlet to be creative because as you mentioned earlier, like there is that balance, right? I made a LinkedIn post literally about this like 2 days ago about how a lot of visionaries start off in architecture because they have that visionary mind. um, and and visionaries typically are led to entrepreneurship because they can see things that other people don't see in plain sight. And so the ability to be creative within a business, like assembling a team, like that's creativity, right? Like assembling systems to make, a lead generation flow lead to sales or lead to, booked appointments and that lead to sales is creativity. Like you sit down and you think about how this is going to work creatively for your business and you build it or you get someone to build it. And so in that way, I think entrepreneurship has allowed me to sort of be creative in ways that like I was looking for that creativity in architecture. And that's where sort of like that's why I was drawn that way. It led me to the built environment, which I absolutely fell in love with. Like, okay, from a visionary standpoint, a building could not be there 2 years, prior to, and it's like a high rise could sort of pop up, kind of out of nowhere. And it could be this creative thing that people interact with that's basically alive in a sense. And so that was just so intriguing to me. And so, like I said, I mean, again, I found a way to sort of bring all those worlds together in, working in VR and entrepreneurship and AI and things of that nature.
That's super dope. Like as you were just explaining that and you were saying the programs that you were going through before, um, a big requirement of those programs was no software. That almost feels like, well, I gotta imagine like a kid coming up now hearing that would be like, "What do you mean you can't use
Right.
any software?" And like,
Yeah.
what it? So, what were you building in these moments? Is it like my mind went to like, all right, here's some popsicle sticks, like
Literally. Yeah.
build something. Was it like that?
We literally had we would draw, we would take boxes, we would take what we called foam core. So it was basically like,
Mm,
the equivalent to like miniature, like um, yeah, like miniature drywall or something like that, with like foam in the middle, with two sides of like paper, hard paper, and cut it up, and literally make architectural forms out of it. And again, like I said, it was good for what the intention was good, like, because they wanted you to think outside the box and like do things that you've never done before. But I think nowadays, like you mentioned, like, people are looking at that, like, the world is moving so fast. Like, by the next thing you know, you'll be able to literally look at a screen, think of something, and it'll pop up. Like,
hmm
while people are making cardboard boxes. So I think we gotta catch up.
Yeah, I think the big platforms are me and my family and my friends. We debate this all the time. But do you have moments now where you're talking about something with your friends or a loved one, and then you go to your phone and that thing is on the phone?
Yes.
But to your point, like we kind of are already at this point where the big platforms can kind of already start to predict or see some of those trends that you're saying. And so if we're at that point, like it's going to be hard for the generation that didn't know or didn't have to go through, hey, here's some popsicle sticks, be creative, to
Right.
actually go to that place.
Right.
Right. And I feel like it gives you an advantage going through that. I think the debate is definitely still out if previous learning methods are going to trump the current ones with all the technology and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any thoughts about that? Like, in terms of how learning is changing, and like you
Yeah.
said, kids are not having to do the same things that you went through in order to get into architecture, for example.
Well, I think, a lot of time oftentimes creativity is limited to the tools you have in your toolbox. And you could have tools in your toolbox, but and they're there literally, but you don't know how to use them. And so, as it pertains to architecture, just how the educational system is changing, I hoped, I went to college, you know I guess 6 years ago, something like that now. I hope things have changed dramatically. I don't think they have, not dramatically. But I personally think it hurt innovation for our generation. Like, our generations are supposed to be the ones creating the next technology for the next generation as it pertains to architecture, right? Because at the time, our tool set was so limited. Like, we were able to play around with these tools after school, right? For me, it was an extreme, because I was still using it. Like, I didn't care, bro. I was still using it. Not too crazy, but like, when I got to my junior, senior year, yeah, absolutely. I was using SketchUp. I was learning Revit, because I would look at these job listings online, and I would realize that they wanted 2 years of Revit experience, which is an architectural program, by the way. And so it just didn't make sense to me that we weren't learning this in school. It was just like, so I did it on my own. I took an independent study. Like, I did all types of stuff to just try to get ahead myself. Um, but yeah, it was a thing that I was very frustrated with at the time, because, I just knew where I had an idea. I guess I would say I didn't know, but like, I had a good idea where things were going. But yeah, I think it kind of cripples us, the fact that we're not encouraged to start exploring these tools at our disposal, and other sectors in often cases are. Um, and that, I believe, is the one of the number one pieces of stagnancy when it comes to revolutionizing architecture and just the field of the built environment in general.
hmm Interesting, man. I'm learning just sitting here listening to you. It I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like conversations like this, it makes me feel a little bit better knowing that there's people out there that think like you, that are doing some of the things that you're doing, because I think the next generation will definitely have to learn from somebody.
Mm.
Um, they they'll have the robots to learn from for sure.
Hmm.
But I think they'll definitely be looking for, in terms of the inputs to the robots. Hey, I want to build like so and so. I want to
Mm.
build like Nate, right? I see what Nate's doing. Like, how can I do something like that? And like almost reverse engineering stuff. And
Mm.
so I think that's what the next generation has to kind of get a grasp of, because we had blueprints. We had some form of a blueprint, right? That we could go to and we could kind of reverse engineer, but we would go through that process of reverse engineering it ourselves. And by the time you get to the end, like you gain some proficiency,
Hmm.
versus now there is no real need to be proficient if you can go to a robot and it can give you instructions.
Right.
So that we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, right? Like let's pivot a little bit. We've talked enough about the robots. Let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about, when I think of architecture, I think of community, right?
Mm.
I think of, you're building something for a group of people to get some value from. That could
Mm.
be, you're building. Now I'm in Charlotte. We're in the North Carolina region, right? And so they're building houses everywhere. When you build houses, you got to build restaurants, you got to build entertainment. So there's this community that is a really big focus right
Mm.
now. Let's talk about the community that, like, what does your tribe look like in this moment as you build out what you want, the capabilities for vision? Like, who is in your tribe and why do you have them there in this moment?
Yeah. So I think first of all, start personally. Other founders who are building really cool things. I think we all really understand that where AI is going and where technology is headed, and being able to move fast and learn the tools as fast as possible is key. So from a community standpoint, from who I spend a lot of my time with are people who are eagerly trying to find those tools and share those tools with each other and sort of learn together, and share what's working for us, etc. So that's I would say like my personal tribe and my personal sort of community is people with that mindset. I also run a school community, actually. It's basically a community of 3D artists, students, as well as people who have started their own 3D uh, architectural visualization companies or just 3D studios in general that would like to learn how to scale their companies. And so I created it, I would say about a year ago. We have about 100 members on school.com. And so if that's something you've been interested in, if you're watching or listening to this, then I would definitely suggest be a part of that because we talk about tools as well. I give a lot of free game on there of like how I started and grew the company and how I was able to market and get the first customer, get the first big job, hire people. And I talk about where things are going as well in that community. Um, Also, entrepreneurs, I would say, and that kind of ties into the first point I made. Just other people from a mindset standpoint that are, because this is not a easy road. I would say it's not an easy road as well. Like I was just having a conversation with one of my buddies out in Houston, and we were talking about sort of making that pivot, making those moves, and when it's time to sort of reimagine what you're doing and make a pivot towards the direction that you're trying to move in. And without community, I don't think you can have some of these conversations because it can be a lonely road. Like you're dealing with what you're dealing with, and you're busy, and you got responsibilities, and you got life and stuff like that. So like sitting down, and then I think to be an entrepreneur too, you actually have to have a sort of mindset that doesn't really allow you to complain much, right?
Mm,
And, venting can sometimes seem like complaining. So sometimes you need that other person that you can lean on, that it doesn't feel like complaining, because they get it too. Like, it's just something y'all dealing with. So it's a conversation. So from a community standpoint, I would say those three pillars are what I try to, and also members or mentors and advisors, people who have ran the route already, or, ran the race in their own way and have something to share. Um, and so those are the community pillars I try to keep myself around.
I like that. And from what I'm hearing, like you're definitely, it could be deliberate, it may not be, but you're connecting with people at different points in their journey, right? You're connecting with somebody who's at the tail end of their journey, like they're transitioning out of being a founder, being in corporate America. Those
Mm-hmm.
people add value. You've got those people who are also in the trenches, just like you. And then it's really cool to see you leverage that tool that you mentioned, school, to really have a community of people trying to learn and figure out maybe their early stage. That's always good to hear. And I'm assuming, or maybe I don't even have to assume, I can ask you, like, you're able to learn from people at these different points in their journeys, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I would say and funny enough, I didn't even think about it like that, but you're exactly right. Like, it's different stages and different journeys. And I think there's something to learn from everyone within their journey, even the people that, I set out to teach or I set out to help. I'll read some of the posts that they put on there sometimes, and I'll be like, wow, like, that's an interesting way to do that. Or, I never thought that way. Or, I'll see people sort of talking to each other, and I'm just kind of blown away by the fact that that community aspect of people just being able to have a platform to communicate with each other, you know, allows people to share uh, results and, things of that nature with each other and help each other out. So I learn stuff every day from people in general.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's transition a little bit, because you just mentioned, right, as a founder, you have to be okay with giving feedback, but then not complaining, like you said, right, or taking some of that. So I'm curious. We all have to, in our journey, you're gonna have to deal with customers that are not happy. Let's
Mhm.
put it that way. So I'm curious, when a customer comes to you and they're not happy, right? They're giving you that feedback and it's not what you may want to hear. Like, how do you go about turning turning that situation, or from just a problem to something else?
Yeah, man. I don't know if I've ever gotten that question, but I deal with it. I've dealt with it, and so the first thing I think about is full ownership, like total ownership. Like, okay, I'm gonna figure out what's going on, right? Like, I'm gonna figure out what's going on, even if it takes some digging. And the first thing I'm gonna do is, put our company in the position to say, okay, these people paid us to do this service. If they're not happy with it, there's something that we have to look into, right? Um, I try my best not to brush away any type of request or any type of like, you know, any type of concern, because again, like, it's an exchange, right? You exchange your money for a service, and if you don't feel like you're getting the thing that you've come for, we got to approach that. So that's the first thing. And the next thing I think about is impartiality and fairness, right? Sometimes my team is involved as well. So the first stage is, okay, what's the problem? you know where did we go wrong within that problem, if we did go wrong, and then we talk internally about that. So if I have, like, for instance, a project manager on the job who actually did something wrong, the first thing I try to do is sit that person down and say, hey, like, let's make sure we're not in the wrong before we say something back. Like, let's figure out what's going on. And sometimes, depending on the relationship, or because business is all about relationships, right? We may sort of take the brute for certain things, right? Just out of all fairness, and again, out of relationship building. But at the same time, like, it's very important for for us to look internally first and say, okay, what did we do? If we did anything, and then sort of approach the situation. So I try to do that every time. And then lastly, I will say contracts, right? Having stuff on paper is one of the best things you can do. And some of our best clauses in our contracts have come from a lot of pain, like have come from, you know, customers or clients or people saying, "Hey, you guys did this," and we're like, "No, no, we didn't." Right? Like out of all good intention, we're like, we didn't mean to do that or whatever. Or you guys said you were going to do this, and well, we had the best intention, of course, working with you, so we would have never, just did that on purpose. But because it's not on paper, it's hard to argue that,
Uh-huh.
And so every time something like that goes wrong, it becomes another exercise or becomes another opportunity to look at our contracts and say, okay, what's missing here? Where was the divide? Where was the misunderstanding? And if we can put something in that contract that prevents that from happening again, we'll do it in a heartbeat.
Hmm.
And
I
so,
love it.
yeah, those are some of the things that we try to do at Vision.
That contract piece is big. That's really big. Um, every time a contract is put in front of me, I immediately think I will pay a lawyer whatever they need so that I do not have to see this contract again. I
Right.
kid you not. They
Yeah.
like every single time because it's like this is it's overwhelming and like but like you said like the beauty is in the details is a phrase I learned from my time in sales.
Mm.
And it truly is something where it sets the expectations. And then once those signatures are dried on that contract or signed electronically, like that's the commitment.
Yeah.
Like you said, and if you have acknowledgement on the front end, like you said, in terms of what did we do, where
Mhm.
did this go off on the rails, along with that
Yeah.
acknowledgement of the commitment,
Right.
you're usually in a good place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really good
So
place.
we try to do business in a way that we're not veering too much away from what we're saying we're doing on paper. Sometimes people don't read the contract, so in that way and even sometimes um, we decide internally or we decide as a group to say, okay, we get that you didn't read it. Here's what we're going to do, right? Because in business, you don't want to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. Like it's just not it's not a good thing to do in business. It doesn't help. It doesn't help, right? And I also read a book called The Laws of Success, and it talks. One of the laws is do more than you're paid for. Anyone that you see that has reached a high level of success, they've done a lot more than they're paid for. And so we try to take that philosophy literally and say, even though you didn't see that in the contract, you know what? We got it. And a lot of companies won't do that. But I think that's one of the reasons, first, second year in business, we grew 200%, right? Because if you're hiring someone to do something, you want the highest form of leverage, period, right? I don't care if someone's paying me $100,000 to do something. They want to make 100 million, and they want to make 200 million if possible. And so it's not that they don't want to pay you. It's literally just they just want the highest leverage. And that's fair because you're in business and you're in business to make money. And so if you just make sure that point of that you're giving them that leverage, and you get your fair reward for it, there should be no issue.
Hmm. That is a lesson to learn specifically. I think again in B2B,
Mm-hmm.
like B2B specifically, where like you said, you may have to the letter is the letter in some cases, but then in other cases, there's definitely some gray area.
Yeah.
And
So,
depending on where that you want that relationship to grow is, you know, where you take that gray area.
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
It's happening at the highest levels. I'll be the first to tell you.
Hmm.
Mid small businesses, they're the ones really looking at contracts and being, stern with it. That's a policy, et cetera. At the highest levels, I'll tell you, man, like they're at lunch and dinner saying, you know what, I got you, right?
Hmm.
I got you. business owner to business owner, or just man to man or woman to woman, like I got you.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about correct me if I'm wrong, the first product you offered was it Render?
Yeah, render vision. Yeah.
Render Vision, right? And so talk a little bit about what that product actually does and like where do you grow from there in terms of the products that you're going to be offering?
So it's all about visualization. If you want someone to invest in something or buy it or approve it or whatever, they got to be able to see it. And so for a very, very long time, people were trying to pitch ideas with pitch decks and PDFs and words and letters and lines. And it just doesn't work like that. There's so much competition out here from a real estate standpoint, from just like general, marketplace standpoint, that you need to be able to differentiate yourself. And so we started in 2020 creating still 3D renderings, which at the time it was extremely helpful because you could take a piece of land that you didn't know what to do with. You had this site plan or whatever, and you could give us some mood images, inspirational images. I want it to look like this and have these type of windows, and we could assemble something that looked very close to what was actually going to be there in a very short amount of time. So they were able to take that, raise money, get approvals, things like that, and that's how we grew initially. And so that then sort of graduated into animation videos. So we started doing these fly throughs, which is even more powerful, right? Because it's storytelling, right? The first thing gets people to see it. It gets people to understand the context and you just, be able to imagine it. But it still took some imagination. It took an imaginative individual to turn that into a story that they then bought into. And we know people buy stories. Like you're in sales, like people buy into stories and people buy even more and more frequently when their heart is attached to it or when their emotion is. And so we understood that and went into animation videos that started to move and share different pieces of the property, or it would show a piece of B-roll, a person that popped up that's smiling or happy, or someone using the place or whatever it is. And again, we saw people get millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in either funding, approvals, and stuff like that from doing that. From there, we then just tried to solve the next problem, right? What's the next problem? Well, a lot of luxury developments, a lot of bigger developments, you would be surprised, are having trouble with sales. They have a lot of issues with sales conversions. Because now the first two things that I mentioned are even now becoming pretty normal and almost archaic. Then you mix in the issue of not being able to physically go to certain places and that the fact that everything is going online and more digital. And so that created a unique opportunity for us to create an immersive AI powered conversational walkthrough or property viewing tool and experience tool that people can interact with from the comfort of their home or from anywhere in the world, and they could sort of be literally in the new place that they're going to buy or rent or lease or whatever, while they're in the comfort of their home. And so that's what we're building now, is like a more immersive, a more sort of sensory and emotion driven approach to property walkthroughs.
That's amazing. I got the thoughts popping in my head all the time when people are talking, and I promise you all, it wasn't just like a hamster in a wheel. But as you were talking, I was thinking of the Disney experience where you do like the 4D movie, or I think one time I rode like the Avatar ride. And it was
Mhm.
like as you go through the world, you're like smelling stuff and like wind and water is like hitting your face, but you get the full experience. And for real estate in particular, the only time we most of the time most of us get to see the actual property, it's like a blank canvas. So to your point, like imagining like filling in the blank for people a little bit so that they can be immersed in it and they can like actually see themselves there. That sounds like a 4D movie experience that I would pay for the way you
Right.
explained it, Nate. Like that
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
Well, you hit it right on the head, man. I couldn't have explained it actually any better. Just imagine that plus an AI agent that can walk you through the or teleport you through anywhere in the property and tell you about everything about in the area or about that particular unit that you're getting ready to buy or lease or rent or whatever, and being able to book meetings for you and basically do anything that you needed to do and as it pertains to making that buying decision.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit. So what does that look like? Is that going to be a host of products, right? Is that where you're thinking where there's a whole suite, right, that Vision provides at the end of the day, or do you feel like you're doing that with your next product release, all those things that you talked about?
Yeah, so all of that is in one product. We want to make sure that there are three that are very strong, three features that are very strong, like the immersive walkthrough, the conversational AI agent, and then the data, right? The data gathering. We're adding some, peppering some small features in there as well, like being able to sort of talk to the agent and say, "Hey, change this couch in here," and it
Mhm.
immediately just changes. So we have that feature now that we've added, but it's going to be a process of letting people use the software, having companies use this, use the software, and figuring out what people want. Because while it's a B2B product, it's very much so a consumer driven user experience. So we have to know, what people are wanting to see. Um, of course, we got to think for them a little bit, just like Steve Jobs esque sort of thinking. But once we approach them with the tools, like here are the things that you have at your fingertips now. It's really up to them to figure out what's most important for them.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about your team that you've built to offer the products that you're focusing on. Like, what does your team look like? What are their backgrounds? Or maybe for anybody who may be interested, you've thrown out the topic of AI a couple times, right? And so I'm curious, like, what your team looks like now, and maybe potentially areas where you may be looking for some additions to your team.
Yeah. So again, a business is different gears, and I think we're coming to an age where there'll be probably one individual, or maybe two, that are responsible for each gear, and so we've become a lot more lean within the past year. And I'll just be honest, like we were last year, we were at close to 30 people,
Mm,
um, and that was everybody from leadership to middle management to artists, things like that. And we could be working on, every bit of 40 projects at one time. Things have gotten a lot leaner to where we're closer to 10 now. And that is artists, and some of them are 1099. Artists that we work with, like 3D artists, to build the experiences. My assistant, co founder of Path, which is the AI sort of assistant tool, as well as some middle management and yeah, marketing personnel. I think things are going to get even more leaner. Probably not for us, but just in general. I think that 10 mark is like going to become the sweet spot, like 8 to 10 individuals, because there are really kind of like four core functions of a business. There's like finance, there's operations, production, there is marketing and sales, and then yeah, marketing and sales.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's interesting to hear founders in this space that we're in now. There's a lot of uncertainty,
Hmm.
around the things. But the one thing I will say is that the business owners I've been talking to, they feel like they can definitely do more with less now.
Yeah.
The effects on the job market and things like that, I think they're still playing out. But just being able to do more with less
Hmm.
earlier on in your business journey, I think that's a net win
Hmm.
for businesses, more businesses to survive past that critical mass point of say like a year or two, right? So that's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's going to dramatically shift the way that we earn and the way that we understand just transactional marketplace conditions. Um, I always give the analogy of like the generations before us, like to leap into our entrepreneurship in a creative way, they didn't do that, right? So telling someone that that is the career that they're going to jump into after high school is like telling them that you're getting ready to create, to commit suicide or something like that, right? So it's like, things are going to change for us too. Like our children are going to be like, yeah, like, I'm about to, I don't even know. Like, we don't even know what the future is going to look like, but it's going to be different, right?
Yeah,
It's going to be
that for
so,
sure. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah. It may not even be starting a business, right? It might just be being a creator. Like, I'm going to do, music or I don't know, man. It's so hard to tell what the next generation will be building and what they will be focused on. And I think because of the dramatic sort of invention called AI, and this dramatic effect on the marketplace, it's hard to the future is quite blurry. And this is for everyone. This, like, most experts are saying that they have absolutely no idea. I mean, we have ideas about um, implications on the marketplace as we know it now, but I think we'll be living in a different world, like, quite literally. I think creators and people who have creative minds will thrive. And I actually wrote a book on it. It's called Design to Win. Um, but generally, it's tough. And I'll just say this last thing: like, I read a book called The Coming Wave. It talks about AI, and it gave this analogy of um, the industrial age and how people were working on a farm, and all of a sudden, like, they see a tractor ride past, and you see like what you do as your job, like literally driving past you, and you're looking at all of the people who you're working with, and you're like, what the heck was that? Like, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Like, the tractor is literally driving by, and we're still working, and it's coming towards us. So, yeah.
I love to hear that, man. I am not offended by your shameless plug of your book, Design to Win. I love
Yeah,
that. I love that. I've been I read in bits and pieces.
yeah,
And so I'm not one of the people that reads a book front to back. I read the pages and then I try to apply them to my life.
yeah.
But so far it's actually a quick read. So
It's
for
very,
those that are interested, definitely a quick read. And I appreciate you not giving us a really thick book that I have to carry around. So for those that are looking for some reading material, make sure you check out Nate's book there. I am not ashamed of that plug, Nate. I
yeah.
appreciate
Got to, man.
that.
Got to.
So I want to, last question I'll ask is in terms of um not dream clients, but where do you see, is there a client or a group of prospects that you haven't gotten in front of yet that should be checking out your product?
My dream has always been to work with cities, like futuristic, forward-thinking cities, because I'm obsessed with cities in general and just like the ecosystem of cities, and I'm obsessed with technology, and so that is my dream client. So much so that I've even thought about just packing up and moving to Dubai because that seems like the next, the place that that's happening. But I would say that is most likely. I might be sort of. speaking it into existence here. But man, that is my absolute dream, is to work with a very forward thinking city that has problems that need to be solved ASAP, right? And I think that's where some of the solutions that we've created are going to become very relevant, right? And so, like I said, as we've been growing the company, the question has become, how can we solve bigger problems? And I think we'll just continue and continue and continue and continue to do that until hopefully, by God's grace, we get there to where we're working with, that dream client. But besides that, like, I can't really think of anything
Oh,
too
that's a
high.
good answer, Nate.
Yeah.
Stumped me with that one. You said cities. I was like, that seems like that's a big idea.
Yeah.
Designing the whole city.
Yeah, man. Like I said, it's one of the things that drew me to architecture, and it's the reason why I went into urban planning, is because to think at the city scale, man. Here's the thing: everything is kind of one thing, and you'll probably understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying with this a little bit deeper. Everything is kind of one thing, and one thing is everything. And so the way I look at a building, or the way we look at, a piece of technology or a problem that we're solving, is the way that it's looked at as the highest level. So just like how atom has the same sort of makeup as what we see as the universe, and it's like if we can approach, or if I can approach the city scale looking to solve problems, just in the same manner that we're looking to solve problems for a building, or problems that a real estate developer is having, then that would absolutely fulfill any sort of dream or whatever that I have. So yeah.
I appreciate that answer, man. In closing, I want to thank you for being a guest, sharing your story. It's amazing. I love what you're building with Vision, the products that you're offering, like Render Vision. Looking forward to hearing about the companies that are out there leveraging your solution, and even consumers. Like you said, you've got a dual focus. In closing, two things. How can folks stay up to date on the brand? And then the lasting thought that you want our listeners and guests tuning in right now to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. So all my socials is just my name. Also, my website's just my name, NateRobert-Eze.com. So I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So, all of it connects to each other. So it won't be too hard. One thing that I want people to take away from this conversation is that, first of all, no thinking is too big. So I believe that we all have this sort of fire in us deep down somewhere that wants to create something. Like, we all have it. And whatever you can imagine, never lose sight of it. Never lose that touch of whatever that thing is. Like, keep dreaming that, keep seeing it, keep believing it, and it is going to happen. The other thing is, start small, right? Start with something that you can start with today, whether that be one step, whether that be one conversation, whether it be, one rep. Just start with it today. And that's how those small steps start to become big steps. And, you start to see the stuff you dream about.
I ain't got to say nothing else, Nate. I appreciate you for coming on the platform again. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Beyond Normal podcast.
Yeah. Appreciate it, brother.
Podcast.